Letting your cats fight it out is a tempting idea, especially if you've tried what feels like absolutely everything to help them get along and you just keep hitting a dead end. But it's not something that I would recommend, and I'm going to take you through what the risks are. I'm Lucy Hoyle, I'm a cat behaviourist and author of the book Your Cat Wishes You Would Read. So let's get started. So, firstly, there's a risk that this isn't even going to work. And this is for two reasons. So, firstly, is that cats don't live in hierarchies, they don't have a dominant and submissive relationship. So, really, if we're putting them together, what we tend to hope for is that they'll have a fight. One cat will be established as the top cat, and the other cat will respect that. And so, in their environment, they'll live like that. So, they will respect the other cat as top cat, and the other cats will live happily, but will sit into that role. Whereas what we tend to find instead is that they will fight. One cat will come off better because one of them has to, for the most part. And so that cat then is more confident and knows it can use the territory and do whatever it wants. It knows it can chase that other cat away. But the bottom cat, or the loser, if you like, is scared, is living in a house now where they can't escape from this house because this is their home, this is their territory, but they're having to live with a cat that they know might chase them at any moment, will block access to resources, and will control the territory. So that cat's not going to be happy. That bottom cat is not going to settle in to a submissive relationship happily. And you'll probably find that all the time they're living together, that bottom cat is just wishing that top cat would go away. And if that does happen later on, if that cat passes away or moves out, that bottom cat suddenly breathes a sigh of relief. They don't become the dominant cat. They're just like, phew, finally, I've got the place to myself. I don't have to be fearful of the other cat now. And the same for the top cat, like the winner, that cat will feel like they constantly have to protect their territory from this loser cat. So this is not a relationship we want to promote. We don't want to set that up. It's so complicated, and we don't want either cat worrying about what the other cat's up to. We'd rather, ideally, get them to be friends, but even more ideally than them fighting is that they just live their own lives separately. They don't care what the other one's up to. They just live as housemates rather than family, and that's absolutely fine. And the second reason why it probably won't work is that when your cats first meet each other, there's an element of surprise there. Or if they've lived separately and then suddenly they're together, both cats are on edge, both cats are tense, upset. The whole atmosphere is not comfortable, it's not relaxed. So if you just throw them together in this one moment and let them fight it out, very, very, very few cats are going to take this in their stride and are going to be like, okay, great, let's just be friends. Like they might run away or they might chase each other and there might be a fight. And with these exact same cats, it could have been totally different if we did it a different way. So even your super sociable cats will struggle in a fight it out situation. So best case scenario is that they'll be fine. And even that will be a small number of cats. The majority of cats are not going to cope well in this situation. So if you're still tempted to give it a try, then there are other risks that might follow afterwards. So of course, a big risk is that there might be an injury. And I've seen cats that have had their tummies scratched open as the cats are wrestling, and the aggression is not going to be inhibited. It's like proper serious aggression. Both cats will feel very, very threatened. So although you will see some cats that are playful and they don't hurt each other, this is going to be a very serious fight. So the risk of injury is high. Alongside that is that it's a very stressful event. So it can be a one-off fight and then you might go back to separating them forever, but they will still have had that fight and it will be super stressful. So both cats will then be worrying about seeing the other cat. And if you start again with a gradual reintroduction, then they've had that experience and that experience is very difficult for them to forget. So we're getting them off on the wrong foot, and that's going to make it much more difficult for things going forward if we try to change tact. The other side to this is that there's a risk of chronic stress. So this is in cases where it's gone fine. So yes, there was a great big fight. There were no injuries. It was quite low level, but there was clearly an incident in that there was wrestling, fighting, and hissing and growling and all that horrible stuff. So the cats are not comfortable around each other, but they are just tolerating each other because there's no other option. So what you'll find here is this is causing your cat chronic stress. And this is where my work comes into play because I often see cats that are chronically stressed and their day-to-day life is a stressful event. Like going down for meals is stressful because the other cat's there that they're scared of. Or using the litter tray is stressful because when they go in there, the other cat can hear them and they come running over to be like, oh, I can see you. Trying to walk past them on the stairs or trying to walk into a room when the other cat is sat on the arm of the sofa and feeling like a little deer in the headlights, like, are you going to chase me? Like that level of worry that they have to go through day in, day out about what the other cat is up to is super stressful and can have a big impact on their emotional well-being. That's the same for both cats. So if you have the one that lost the fight, then that's what they'll be experiencing, trying to tiptoe around the house. But also for the one that won, they feel like they have to now protect their territory from this other cat. They know they can do it, but they will have to do all the blocking. They will have to watch them as they go from A to B, and they will have to chase them around if they don't want them near and sharing the same stuff. So for both cats, it's stressful, even if one of them is being super aggressive and the other one's just trying to get away. Both cats would prefer a single life if they're showing these sorts of behaviours, whereas if we'd have done it differently, we could have got to the point where they're happy to share. Cats that do experience chronic stress then begin to display behaviour problems. So this is something I see quite often. I often work with cats that are chronically stressed. So what you might notice more is that your cats, one or both, might become more inhibited. They might hide more often. They might be less sociable. They might be less relaxed around you because they're wondering what the other cat's up to. So that's going to affect your relationship, and you might not be able to spend as much time with them. They might not be comfortable sitting in your lap anymore. So that can be harmful for you guys. Also, the risk of aggression towards you is increased as well, because if they're fighting and you try to intervene, so you try to separate them or break them up or just stroke them when they're having a stare off or they're fixated on the other cat, then the aggression can be redirected onto you or your family. So that's something that we'd rather avoid too. Toileting issues are common in this scenario, so specifically euro marking. One or both cats can begin to euro mark so that they feel like their territory is a safe place, so they're having to like double down their marks. Facial marking is not enough anymore, and they have to euro mark instead. And once one cat starts, then often the other cat will start as well. So you can have a really difficult problem on your hands there. And house soiling too, so peeing away from the litter tray or pooing away from the litter tray. That can happen just when cats are feeling stressed, but it can also happen due to logistics, like they can't get to the tray because the other cat's hanging out in the way. Or once they use it, then the other cat comes and stalks them or watches them or pounces on them. So these are all things that are just really unfortunate consequences of that decision we made right at the beginning to let the cats fight it out and do it their own way. So it's really important to keep these things in mind, because I know how tempting it is. I know it feels like you can have their introductions done and dusted in one day if you just put them together and see how it goes. But realistically, to get them to a point where we want them to be happy, it takes much longer with much more patience. What you'll also find is that it's not a case of there being one fight and then their relationship is set for good. There'll probably be multiple fights going forward. So it could be that as one comes in the cat flap, the other one chases them and ambushes them there. It can be that as they walk past them on the stairs, one cat's swiping or hissing and chasing them away. So this thing is not a case of just a one-off event we can get out of the way. It's a long, ongoing thing that we're going to have to constantly manage going forward to try to get everyone to a place where they're happy again. So instead of this, we want a slow introduction. So we want to keep them separate initially, make sure in both their areas they've got everything that they need in terms of litter tray, food, cat tree, beds, everything. And then we need to get them gradually used to the idea of sharing their home with another animal, another cat. So it's not a case of it just being a massive like shock to the system of like, there's another cat in your house, deal with it. It's just a little like gradual introduction of like, we're just hinting at the idea that there's another cat here. So if they can sniff each other onto the door or they can hear each other, then that's a good, like that will happen without you having to be involved. And that's a little good indication that there's another cat in the house. Okay, I'm just sort of getting, like I'm not having to see them. I'm not interacting with them, but I know they're there. It's a good little like in. And then we'll start introducing scent. So you can swap some of their bedding. You can stroke them with cotton cloths and then leave that in the other cat's space and see if they interact with it and approach it and see what they do. So again, we're trying, like generally when cats live together, they will be scent marking on each other or on the same stuff. So they tend to create a group scent as they go. And so we're just starting that process and getting them used to the idea in a very non-confrontational, very safe way that you're about to share your territory with another cat. And this is what they smell like. And they can tell lots of information from that scent about the other cat. So do that for as long as we need. And watch the behaviour of the other cat. So if they're recoiling from the scent of the cat, then you know that's probably not going to go so well. So we want them to be quite relaxed around the scent of the other cat, Hopefully they'll be happy to share the same beds at separate times so that that group scent is really beginning to become established. Then we can let them see each other through a safe barrier. So what we're doing here is just letting them meet in a very safe way. The risk of fighting is at zero because we've got that barrier in place and they know each other a little bit because they've smelled each other. And so it's just a case of now getting that visual and having a look at what they look like. So you can do this. It's normally good to do this gradually too, if possible, but sometimes logistics don't allow for it. But an ideal setup is like a tall baby gate that they can't get through with a towel draped over the top so that you can control how much they can see under the gate. So, like, that might not be practical. And sometimes if you use like a fly screen, then that can be a bit more challenging in that maybe you can tack some paper to the bottom and you can remove little bits at a time, but still it's quite challenging. You can try opening the door just a little bit with a fly screen there or a gate there, so that there's only a little gap, but the cats obviously have to be right up near it to be able to see round. So that can be a little bit too much too soon. So have a think about a way that you can get your cats to see each other without it being a sudden, like, here's another cat, like in their face really quickly straight away. So have a think about what space you have and how to set that up. In this scenario, we also want to be using distractions to stop them rushing up to the gate. So I would use treats here and far from the barrier. Start really far away and stay really far away. There's no need to get them super close. Or you can use toys, especially if you have a kitten, then you can keep them occupied with toys. They probably won't even give your older cat a second look. So it's just a case of your older cat getting used to watching the kitten play. So it's there's quite a lot to take in and it's quite proactive. You really have to be proactive in this scenario as well. But you'll get a good gauge as to how they're getting on once they can see each other through the barrier. So if they're going up to the barrier, hissing at each other, trying to swipe through the gaps or putting their paws under the gate or whatever they're trying to do, then it will give you a gauge as to how they're going to act once the barriers come down. If they couldn't give each other a second thought and they don't care about each other, that's amazing. That's ideal. We want them to ignore each other because aiming for them to be best friends and snuggling up together and rubbing their faces on each other is probably a bit too like idealistic. It's probably not where we're going to get to. So if they just shrug their shoulders and walk off, that's perfect. We're really good. Like, I'm up for that. That is a great meeting because it means when they are together, it's going to go a lot more smoothly than if they're suddenly barraging up to the barrier. So once you have a huge amount of barrier meetings under your belt and you're confident enough that they are familiar with each other, you've got a gauge of how they're going to react when they're together, then you can begin to take the barrier away. So when we do that, again, it's super, super, super proactive. I can't stress that enough. You have to be there to manage this interaction and to set them up for success. What lots of people do is just open the barrier and go, oh, how's this going to go? And they like stand there with bated breath and watch it unfold. Whereas what we want to do, as soon as you see anything like wide-eyed staring or tensing up or freezing and anything that you feel like is going to result in a little chase or a hiss or a pounce or anything, then you need to get involved. So get your toys out again if you've got a younger cat. Use treats to keep them far away from each other. And it's just a very low pressure situation. Like, there is no need for them to go near each other. There's no need for them to actually interact. We just want them in the same room at the same time doing their own thing. That's absolutely ideal. So once you've done a few of those, I always say to people, like, the first few are very telltale. So if you do 1 or 2 meetings and you just cannot keep your kitten under control, they're desperate to get over to the other cat, it's going to be much more challenging for you to get them together. Whereas if it's super easy, there's nothing really happening, they're not desperate to go over, they are doing their own thing, then you can move much more quickly. So here, what we were trying to do is not lengthen out the time in one go, in that you don't want every meeting to be longer and longer and longer. We want to vary up. So some are longer, some are shorter, but gradually we are increasing the amount of time they spend together. And what we're doing is when you've got a good amount of time on your hands, you're trying to get the cats to settle. That's what I would recommend anyway. So we want loads of places to sleep. You want your lap available. You want 1 or 2 people there with you if you can to keep them occupied. And if you can get one to settle down and fall asleep, or at least rest and just snuggle up, then the other one is free to do what they want, as long as you're making sure that they don't pounce on the other one or bother the other one or even approach the other one in the early days. And if they both settle, you can put your feet up and be like, whew, okay, good, we're set for the evening or the next couple of hours or however long. When they wake up again, you're back to being proactive. So it's lots of hard work in the first few meetings, but you don't have to do this forever. You're not going to have to constantly be on high alert and constantly policing them to see what they're up to and to keep their behavior under control forever. You just have to do it quite a lot at the beginning to set up good expectations, to help them get to know each other, to learn about each other in a very risk-free way. And then you'll find that once they're doing that, it becomes a lot easier to be like, oh, okay, I'm not really bothered about that other cat. They're doing what they want to do, and I'm doing what I want to do. Plus, if you do notice that after all this, there is a little fight or a chase or a spat in some capacity for some reason, then they will usually be more resilient to that because they've got this big bank of meetings they've already had. They've spent hours and hours together. And yes, you've been there to manage it, but they're more resilient to the odd fight that they might have. And so are more likely to recover quickly and get back to sleeping together and snuggling up near each other or in the same room without there being any issues. So I realised after all that it's definitely much, much, much more difficult to do a gradual introduction and go through all these stages and spend time at each stage making sure you're going at the cat's pace. I realise that's a challenge and it's super time consuming. And it would be much quicker to just throw them together and see how it goes, especially if they do fine at the end of it. But please try to safeguard yourself and your cats against the risks because it's something that I see time and time again. And the owners are always saying to me, like, if only we'd started on a different tact. So, although you might hear that it's worked for some people, but it's not something I would recommend just because those risks are there. And every cat's an individual, aren't they? What's worked for someone else isn't necessarily going to work for you. Anyway, let me know about your cats and how things are going. And I will see you next week for another video. Take care.